Aloha, my name is Kapono Souza. I go by Kapono for short. I am a licensed medical massage practitioner. I've been practicing as a professional for 23 years as a licensed therapist, but 30 years as a therapeutic body worker. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit about my story, how I got into this profession, and hopefully how it can inspire you to get into this profession as well. So my story starts when I was a kid, very young. One of my earliest memories, I believe I was around 7 years old, and I was always very sickly. Growing up, I had a lot of, when I got sick for a long time. And I had really bad asthma. And as a child, not really understanding or knowing what that was like, other than my friends and my cousins going outside and playing and having a good time, and me having to stay inside because I couldn't breathe. It was very frustrating for me. So I spent a lot of my time at my grandmother's house, and I distinctly remember this one night. I remember it was during the winter, because I remember the thunder, I remember the lightning, I remember the storms, and it was raining really bad. And for some reason, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I felt this pressure on my chest, and I just couldn't breathe. And I started yelling, and I remember my tutu wahine, my grandmother, coming over and putting her hand on my chest, right here on my sternum, and I could hear her pray. And while she was praying, this warmth would come out of her hand. It started to go into my body. And, as a young kid, you grew up thinking about angels and miracles. And that was the first time I can remember what it felt like to really feel like this was a real miracle. Because when she put her hand on my chest and she started to say her prayer, she would rub my chest like this. And that warmth would penetrate my body. I immediately felt my lungs start to open like this. My chest would open and I could breathe. And I remember thinking in my head, wow, this is what it feels like to really witness a miracle. And so I think that was the moment when that seed was really planted in me. Whether directly or indirectly, in Hawaiian tradition, there's this exchange of what we call ike, or knowledge or wisdom, and it's generally thought to come from one's breath, because the belief is the breath is an extension of your spirit. So when you aloha someone, when you honi honi ihu, what you're really doing is you're co-mingling your breath with another person's breath, which is really an extension of my spirit and your spirit. So we are acknowledging the spirit in each of us, right? And it was in that moment when I was a kid that ha was exchanged, and there was this co-mingling of breath in that way where knowledge was directly embedded inside of me. I mean, that is the pivotal moment for me growing up. From that moment on, it was almost as if I knew what I needed to know and how I needed to know, and it was very effortless. So I spent my early years from 7 years old till about through high school, actually, working with my grandmother and with my immediate ohana, my immediate family, doing what we call lomi, which is our version of massage therapy. My grandmother would share with me stories of how she learned, and in return, the style of learning was it wasn't formal. It was more about what we call makahana ka'ihi, by learning by doing, right? So she would show me how to start here, and we always started here. This what was shared was this was our foundation, right? So you always start here in the chest, and you always work from the lungs to the sternum to the opu, and you work in this area. So from 7th grade to high school, that's what I learned on how to what we call ha, is to feel in the body from up here in the chest. And then And then fast forward a couple more years through into high school, my tutu, she got into a car accident, and both of her knees were injured. And it was at that point when I somewhat formally was taught how to feel joints and manipulate joints and set joints. Again, it was indirectly, it wasn't formally taught, but I learned by just the process of feeling. And then tutu would say like this, okay, this, now you pull this way, now you set that way, and then you push that way, and you rub like this. I got into canoe culture coming out of high school and started paddling competitively, and I also got involved in sailing traditional Hawaiian sailing canoes called Wa'akaulua. And my cousin Ka'au invited me to come on board and learn how to sail. And at the time, they were building this canoe called Hawaii Iloa. So I was privileged enough to participate and be a crew member aboard Hawaii Iloa's voyage to Tahiti. And it was there that what I would refer to as like a cultural birth, right? So we're born once into this space, but then there's this cultural birth where you really find out who you are on a much deeper and profound level and marry the two. So I found that on this place in Tahiti called Tapu Tapu Atea. And I remember very distinctly standing there with all of these Hawaiians, all of these Tahitians, all of these Maoris, and all of our cousins from throughout Polynesia converging at this one piko, this center from which the voyaging canoe traditions started from, and they populated Polynesia, this Tapu Tapu Atea. And I'm sitting there with my cousins, Hawaiians, Maoris, Tahitians, etc. And I remember myself again thinking to myself, what is it that we as the Hawaiian people have shared with the world, right? And what came to me was, well, we shared with the world hula, we shared with the world surfing, we shared with the world the aloha spirit. And so those are some of our great contributions to the human experience on a much larger scale. And then I brought it back to myself as what is it that I can do? What is it that I can give and share that aligns with the values that I learned, that align with our cultural traditions? And the realization was like, we as Polynesians and Hawaiians specifically are very rich, and we have so much more that we can give and share to benefit everyone. And it immediately struck to me like, well, what about our healing traditions? Like everybody has a right to live a rich, full, abundant life, right? And what sets us back is sickness, yeah, or weakness. And our ancestors, through my grandmother, through me, there's this line of this tradition of healing that deserves to be shared. Because I remember growing up, my grandmother said, aloha is about giving freely. It's coming from the heart. It's an extension of your love for somebody else. And the universe desires that, right? That's what we all need and want. And that's really the true extension or the true manifestation of what we call ola, is to be healthy, right? So I made a commitment to myself on that marae, on that day at Tapu Tapu Atea, to say, I will, regardless of whatever I do in my life, this gift that was shared with me is my life work. I will always do that, do this regardless of whatever else. So I committed and promised myself that I will share our tradition, our healing art of Lomi Lomi, which is our version of therapeutic body work. Um, and that will be my life work. And so when I came home, I decided to enroll into a massage school because, as you all know, we need to have some sort of paper that acknowledges us as professional therapists. And what I saw, what I really believe is valuable about that is there's two sides. Um, there's the art and the science, right? So as a Lomi Lomi practitioner, that's your practice, that is your discipline. But you also must be a professional. So the idea is to be a practitioner and a professional at the same time. It's all about finding balance, and that's very consistent with our cultural values. This idea of ku and hina, male and female, up and down, and finding balance. When you find balance, that's pono. When you are pono, you are creating the conditions for ola, for optimal health and well-being. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health is when you are pono. So it just is really combining what I know and what was shared from my tutu and from that line, and bringing the two together without conflict and sharing that with somebody else and others to our community, with the desire to allow our community and, to a greater extent, others around us much healthier, because I know if they're healthy, then I'm healthy. And that's really what it's about for me.
Thank you for watching the Skin Institute Internationale channel. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. The links below.